Good evening, everybody. I'm chairing tonight's meeting and welcome everybody who has decided to join. I thank you very much. Just a short introduction to who I am. I'm William Redfern. I'm the chair of the Hampton Society, who are the Residents Association of Hampton that's been in existence for over 60 years. We represent over 500 households and we would normally hold a series of talks and events throughout the year, but this has not been any usual year. So we've had to rely on our regular newsletters and e-newsletters to keep everybody informed. Our membership is only £6.50 a family and per year, and that includes newsletters, talks throughout the years, are all included within the fee. And if you'd like to find out more, please go to thehamptonsociety.org.uk. So that's me, and I'd just like to introduce tonight's event. These community conversations are the council's engagement programme. They give residents and businesses the opportunity to meet their local ward councillors via borough-wide events and have their say on what matters to them locally and specific issues via a series of themed discussions, of which tonight is one. For the past few years, the council has hosted around 20 local community conversation ward events across the borough. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, it's not been possible to hold physical events, and that's why we're doing these Zoom calls. So thank you for attending again. Crime and safety was a theme that came through nearly all the previous events. So the intention of this session is to have it dedicated to the subject of community safety. So in that respect, we would really only welcome questions that are related to community safety within the time that we've got for tonight. Now, the way that tonight will work is just to let you know that the whole thing is being recorded and it will be available on the council website after the event. Our community engagement team officers at Richmond Council, Siobhan Oakey, are also attending and will be writing up notes and actions after the event. And we also have a back office team that will help you if you have any technical issues throughout the evening. So all attendees other than myself and our speakers are muted. If you do wish to speak, then please write the word question and then the subject matter in the chat bar. Now the chat is at the bottom of your screen in the middle. If you click that, you'll see you should see a pane open up on the right of the screen. So if you've got a question, don't write the actual question itself, just write the word question followed by the subject. So that, for example, could be graffiti. So write question on graffiti, and then we will look at answering it throughout the evening. When I say your name, a member of the event team will unmute you. And when you do speak, please turn your camera on so we can see who's talking. If during the conversation you have a point or a question about a similar point on the theme, for example, graffiti, you could use the hand tool to signal the chair that you would like to add something. So I will see that you want to add to the conversation. Please use the chat to share your views throughout the discussion, and we will try to bring it into this discussion. You will have all been sent the event etiquette, reminding you of the need to be respectful of all speakers. We're sure that we won't need to, but if we do mute or remove participants, the event staff will do. If we need to remove you or mute you, the event staff will do that. If there are any problems, we will communicate with all individuals via the chat or by inviting them to an adjoining virtual discussion. And after the event, attendees will be emailed the email address of all the local representatives and web links that have been discussed in the meeting to save people from writing them down tonight. So you don't need to worry about that. We'll be in contact afterwards. Tonight, we're going to hear from local ward councillors, chairs of the local police liaison groups, and police representatives. Our panel tonight are for Hampton, Councillor Suzette Nicholson, Councillor Gareth Roberts, and Councillor Geraint Thompson. And for Hampton North, Councillor Avril Curlow, Councillor Kate Howard, and Councillor Geoffrey Samuel. The police representatives attending tonight are Inspector Rebecca Robinson, PC Merrick Mers Reagan, and PC Grant Young. The Police Liaison Group and Safer Neighbourhood Board representatives are John Murray for the Police Liaison Group and Carole Atkinson for the Safer Neighbourhood Board. The agenda tonight will be a short introduction from our local ward councillors, followed by a short introduction from John Murray and Carole Atkinson, followed by a short presentation from Mark Wolski, who is the Community Safety Officer, and his introduction will be about domestic violence. Following that, there'll be a short update from the local police about key news in the local area. And finally, the community conversation, we imagine, will start at around 7:10. And as I said before, please put your questions to the panel in the chat area. We hope to conclude by 8 o'clock. And so without further ado, I'd like to move on to the first agenda item, and that is a report from Hampton Councillor Suzette Nicholson.
Right, good evening, everyone. This is my short update for Hampton Ward. Proposals for a CPZ were consulted on, and although several roads showed the required levels of support, none could be connected to make a sensible CPZ area. A further review of parking arrangements for Station, Ashley, Milton and Oldfield roads have been added to the parking work programme, hopefully for starting in the near future. Also, one of the large accommodation barges crossed the river to St Albans Riverside near the start of November. The Parks Department worked with the police, the Environment Agency, the Crown Estates, the London Fire Brigade and Elmbridge Council. The boat was issued with a fixed penalty notice. And if a boat is actually attached to Richmond's riverbank, it means it is against our mooring bylaw. The boat has now left. Planning permission for the development of Hampton Pool buildings and infrastructure was at last heard at the Planning Committee on the 18th of November. This means we can look forward to the pool being able to be enjoyed for many years to come. After a consultation, a girls' football pitch is to be placed in Hathrop Park for the 2021-22 football season. There was an overwhelming majority in favour of the new pitch, which will be placed on the left-hand side as you enter the park. The sports clubs are to promote sustainable travel to and from the site. It has been disappointing that so many community events put on by the traders have been cancelled because of the pandemic. Screen on the Green and the Christmas event, to name but two. Councillor Roberts has been working with the Traders Association to make sure they receive support during lockdown. We thank the traders for their hard work, and I encourage you to support them. There have been reports of suspected drug dealing around the Green and Tudor Road. To deal with this, the police need further information, so please report any hard facts, date, time, etc. to them and help them in building up any evidence. There have been reports of vehicles speeding in Oldfield Road. This is dangerous for families for St Mary's School at arrival and leaving times. I'm hoping that the local police will be able to spare some of their resources to do speed checks in the area and issue fines if necessary. I've also asked that the council monitor speeds and consider additional traffic measures as appropriate. To ensure a safer place for children, a school street has been implemented in Ripley Road for Hampton Infant and Nursery School. The first 6 months is a consultation period, and you can feed your views into this on the council's website under consultations. I hope this has covered the main issues of concern for residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. And I believe for Hampton North Ward, I beg your pardon, Councillor Geoffrey Samuel will give an update.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, I can hear you now, Geoffrey.
Well, as this is the season of goodwill, I want to start by supporting something that the leader of the council is doing in our area, because I've been active and I've been very concerned in recent weeks that although our community centre was allowed to open at the very beginning of July, Cllr, which had the lease and therefore the responsibility, did not open it. And that means that our residents weren't getting the classes, the courses, the activities that the community not only wants, but actually needs. And I was very disappointed because in the early days of the White House, a number of members of Cllr were very active in supporting the community via the White House. Anyway, it's been the view of Kate and myself for some time that the only solution was going to be if somehow the council could take back the lease. And I know that the leader has been active in that. And the situation arose to recent problems to a large extent because the YMCA, which did such a wonderful job for the community, withdrew because regrettably Cllr wasn't prepared to make the changes that would have been needed to keep the YMCA on board. Anyhow, we are now in the position, and the leader, I thank him for what he's done on this. The council is now back in charge. And the other thing that Kate and I have been very keen on is that next to the White House, there is a youth centre with actually huge premises. And if the youth centre and the White House had an integrated management, we'd be able to develop there something for the community of absolutely first-rate value. And so I'm now optimistic. I'm just confining myself to this one issue, as you wanted me to be brief, Mr. Chairman, confining myself to this one issue only, but I'm glad that now that the obstacle has been removed, the prospects for getting a first-rate modern community centre look better than they have in recent months.
Thank you, Geoffrey, and we'll wait with enthusiasm to see how things develop there. Thank you. I'd like to now pass on tonight's proceedings to John Murray and Carole Atkinson from the Safe Neighbourhoods Board and from the Police Liaison Group.
William, I think there's an update from Councillor Cllr first.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Councillor Cllr.
Thank you. I'd like to cover a little bit quickly about the White House because some of that was not factually correct, and I'd know that being the former chair of Cllr CIO and Cllr. The White House lease was surrendered in time for the school to open in September, and prior to that, it couldn't be opened. I'd like to carry on by saying that the food bank has reopened there, and it will be open as before on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 9:30 to 12 on a Tuesday and 2 to 5 on a Wednesday. Donations can be made at All Saints Church on Mondays and Thursdays, or at the Vineyard if you're Richmond based and tuned in. I'd also like to urge everybody to have their say on the Hampton Common consultation, which closes in 2 days' time. Be quick, whether you're for or against a football pitch going on to Hampton Common, have your say and get in touch no matter what your opinion is. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. We've now got cable for high-speed connections under Oak Avenue near the stables in Hampton Common, and improvements have been made as per previous summer community conversation requests to the Oak Avenue local nature reserve. I've personally walked the trail with 2 council officers and talked about the possibilities. We've got interpretation boards both in Hatherot Park and the Oak Avenue Nature Reserve entrances. There's going to be smaller ones coming. There's a new stag beetle loggery. There'll be a bee habitat coming when we've got a friends group set up in conjunction with what used to be Swellen but is now Habitats and Heritage. And the old bog area will hopefully get rejuvenated next year as well. We've been clearing up fly tipping and graffiti that's been around the ward, particularly at Oak Avenue. There's more to be done there. I've got the photos ready to send, and regular sweeps of the areas that back onto the nature trail where lots of fly tipping's been dumped frequently. So officers have recommended that that's swept every fortnight to make sure that things get picked up from the RHP estate. Other matters of antisocial behaviour with the fireworks. I've been inundated with firework emails and got lots of all the debris that was left in the green open spaces cleared up. Been busy with the Free School Meals campaign, replaced the bus shelter on Old Farm Road that was leaking and dripping, which was a bit of a hazard. Fallen and broken branches have been cleared, which were also trip hazards. I've been involved with planning applications in the ward, supporting some. I've been at the Safer Neighbourhoods Board meeting, and we've been advised to forward on messages about scams. 2 scams, one for COVID-19, people calling about food parcel deliveries and asking for bank account details for these. And the second one is posing as council officers regarding insulation. There is more, but I'm going to keep it brief. And if you want to hear more, subscribe via William to my regular newsletter.
Thank you, Avril. Please accept my apologies. I was really getting my head ahead of myself. And thank you very much for your contribution. So moving on, we are now going to hear from the Police Liaison Group, John Murray, and from the Safe Neighbourhoods Board, Carole Atkinson. So John, would you like to start?
Thank you, William. Thank you, William. Nobody's admired my background, which is obviously superior to everyone else's. And I can recommend it. It's part of Hampton. I expect you recognise it.
It's Hampton Pool.
Well, yes. Welcome, everyone. I'm John Murray, and I chair the Hampton and the Hampton North Police Liaison Group. And I also sit on the Safe Neighbourhood Board representing the Neighbourhood Watch in the same Hampton wards. I'm involved in the launch of OWL, which you should all know about by now, and I sit on several safeguarding and crime prevention committees. I'm also a Metropolitan Police volunteer, and that enables me to work with Grant and Marek to produce a regular bulletin, which I know, looking at you, a lot of you do receive that. And being a volunteer for the police, I get them to give me information and distribute it. That goes to about 600 people now, which has been built up over the years. I'm passionate about increasing community safety, especially about scams. My background personally is financial services, so that helps me a lot. There's a lot of scams. That wasn't one. And there's particularly one in the borough where the door knockers, builders, pretending to be police officers, tradesmen, are working in an area. And it's quite frightening, having seen the stats that I had this morning, how often this happens in one area. And the effect on victims is absolutely horrendous. So we're going to, Carole and I have been talking about it, and now we're going to do knowledge nights by Zoom or MS Teams to really attack this and make people aware of what happens, and trying to target particularly care homes, all sorts of areas where the vulnerable are one of those who are hit by the doorstep scams. Every one of us, everyone I'm looking at now, has been the subject of a scam in one way or another, post whatever. So a lot of work's going on about that. So OWL is one of the tools to make people aware of scams. And if you don't know about it, please find out and join it. If you want to contact me, you'll get the details through the police at the end. And anything I can do locally, wearing my PLG hat or my Metropolitan Police volunteer hat, looking after scams and other things, please tell me. Thank you, William.
Thank you, John. Carole, would you like to join us?
Yes, I just realised I've never introduced myself. So I should say that I have been involved with the Safer Neighbourhood Board and its forerunners since 2005, either as a member, vice chair or chair, and I currently am one of the 3 joint chairs. We have about 30 residents who attend 4 times a year, so it's the last Tuesday in the month, January, April, July and October. And we have an opportunity to question very senior police staff, police officers about what's going on in our borough. This is not about urgent things where you'd ring 999, but ongoing things that cause some issues. And the sort of people we have on our group are Neighbourhood Watch members, Police Liaison Group chairs. We have older people, different ethnicities, faith. Avril is there, in fact, for business, education, disabilities, and the general community. And you'll notice from that we don't have any young people, and we really do need more young people to be involved. And hearing about the youth club in Hampton, maybe I should be trying to find a new member there. We do have on the Safe Neighbourhood Board, we have representation on lots of pan-London groups. For instance, I sit on the MET-CC, which is the Control and Command, the 999-101. And quite often I've taken up complaints. If you ever have a complaint about what's happened on a 999 or a 101, you just let me know, and obviously the details will be in the list that Ellie sends out. Then they can actually listen to that call and find out what happened, and if it's necessary, take remedial action with the person who was involved. I'm also on the Stop and Search Pan-London group, and obviously Stop and Search is very much in the news at the moment. And I should say that last week, two of our chairs, Wendy Carr-Pope and myself from the SNB, had a meeting with Cressida Dick, and this was all about community engagement. And we do have to say that this is now going right up to the top of the agenda. The police can only do what they do with our help. There's about 300 police in this borough, and there's about 190,000 residents. So they need us to be the eyes and the ears. So really, I'm sort of encouraging people, keep an eye out on what's going on. The Safer Neighbourhood Board, when we're meeting back for real, is open to any member of the public to come along and ask questions. We've always had open meetings. And then just to reiterate, we've got a fantastic police service in this borough, actually. We get on very, very well, and with the council. But remember, if there's an emergency, it's not the PLG or the Safer Neighbourhood Board, it's 999. And if the incident has happened and you've come home and found you've been burgled, it's 101, or you can report it online, and that'll all be in the notes afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carole. Thanks for that update. That's very thorough indeed. So we now have a short presentation from Mark Wolski, who is the Council Community Safety Officer, and he'd like to talk about domestic violence. So Mark, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you. Mark Wolski, Vulnerabilities Manager for Richmond and Wandsworth. So White Ribbon Day, 25th of November, it's part of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I'm going to talk to you about 7 things. I'm going to give you 7 national facts, 6 local facts, 5 myths about domestic abuse, 4 things to look out for, talk about 3 domestic homicide reviews, 2 ways to seek help, and 1 key message. So here goes. I'll keep within time as best I can. 7 key facts. Domestic abuse is estimated to be about 40% underreported in the United Kingdom. There are 1.2 million crimes per annum in the UK. Each year, there are 100,000 adults who are at high risk of serious harm or homicide. Time. On average, victims live with domestic abuse 2 to 3 years before they actually get help. Suicide. It's estimated that 3 women a week take their own lives as a result of domestic abuse. Children. Around 18% of children in domestic abuse households are injured as a result. Cost. The cost of a single victim is estimated to be £34,000. A homicide is estimated to cost £2.2 million. 6 key local facts. There are around 2,000 incidents and 1,200 crimes per annum in the Richmond area. The financial year to date, during the coronavirus pandemic, the volume has increased by 5.9%. Hampton North contributes 10.7% of all crime, domestic abuse crime. Hampton contributes 3.6% of crime. The average number of cases at the domestic abuse multi-agency risk assessment conferences has risen by 47% during the coronavirus pandemic. Demands on the advocacy services by Refuge has risen around approaching 50% compared to the quarterly demands of the previous year. 5 myths. It only happens to a certain type of person. People choose abusive partners. It's just the odd domestic row. All couples have them. Children don't see the abuse, so are not affected. Not round here. 4 things to be mindful of and to look out for. People avoiding saying something because they don't want to upset their partner. Feeling scared when your partner is angry because you can't predict their behaviour. Or feeling a pressure to change who you are or move the relationship further than you want to. And isolation. Seeing less and less of family and friends to avoid arguments with your partner. 3 domestic homicide reviews. We're currently commissioned 3 domestic homicide reviews that go back over a couple of years. Laureline Garcia Bateau, murdered in March 2019. We're in the midst of a a deep domestic homicide review with a significant learning. You may recall Layla and Akbar Aristo, the murder that took place in July 2019 in the Whitton area, subject to domestic homicide. And a third domestic homicide review, whose name I can't pass on for reasons of confidentiality at this particular stage. So a domestic homicide review crossing boundaries with other parts of London and the UK. And then 2 ways to seek help apart from phoning 999 and the police. As a reminder of the National Domestic Violence Helpline, and also our commission providers, Refuge, all of the details of which may be found on the council website. Now, I realise I'm rushing through this, and I'm hoping to catch up some time for the agenda this evening. But there's one key message I would like to pass on from the short facts that I presented to you, is that domestic abuse is unacceptable. Domestic abuse does happen in all of our communities, and that's all of our communities, without fear or favour, types of communities, demographics, ethnicity. It cuts across all of our communities. Chair, I thank you for your time and giving me the opportunity to talk about White Ribbon Day and these key facts. If there's any further questions, I'll be willing to take them, and I know my details will be passed at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
I'd just like to apologise to everybody. There were a few problems with Mark's sound, and so don't worry if it wasn't your end, it was mainly Mark's end. Sorry about that, Mark, but all of his details will be shared after the event. So if there was anything that you particularly wanted to find out more about, you should get that in the email that will follow this up. Mark, could you just finish by saying what White Ribbon Day is, please, just in case if anybody has missed that?
It's part of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So the phrase White Ribbon Day was coined in terms of like a local UK perspective in terms of the campaign against violence against women and girls. It is actually part of a United Nations approach to the gender-based violence. And I appreciate I can hear my microphones playing up.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation. And I'm afraid it's a revelation to me, and I'm very pleased to hear about it. Thanks very much for your report. And as I say, those details will be following in an email after this event. So now we'd like to move on to our local police and a short update from Rebecca.
Hello, everybody. I'll keep it really brief because I want to give you as much chance as possible to ask questions. So my name's Inspector Rebecca Robinson. I'm in charge of the safe neighbourhood teams across the whole of Richmond. So that's all 18 wards, obviously including these ones. So yeah, I'm just sort of here to say hello and answer any questions that you may have. In terms of crime, we've had a very different year this year with COVID. It's a bit too early now. Obviously, we're just coming out of the second lockdown. It's a bit too early really to sort of assess the impact of that on crime. But what I can tell you, we did receive an extra £10,000 in funding for Richmond Safe Neighbourhoods to patrol within the last 4 weeks. And that was specifically to answer any concerns to do with COVID, any issues of ASB, because we did find there was a lot of concerns around these in lockdown 1 amongst Richmond and Richmond residents.
That's antisocial behaviour.
Sorry, antisocial behaviour.
So no politics, no jargon.
I know, sorry. This is 13 years, it's hard to drop it. My friends say the same. But yeah, so we've had some good results working alongside the council COVID marshals, the park guard that have been out as well, in terms of addressing not just COVID compliance, but also a couple of arrests, stop and searches. I'm aware as well, especially in Hampton, burglary is a concern at the minute. So we'll obviously be putting out some crime prevention advice around this. We've got a winter nights plan, which is concerned around patrolling areas of high burglary, not just for the safe neighbourhood teams, because as many of you will know, we only have 2 PCs and 1 PCSO per ward now, which is very unfortunate and not where we were. You know, 2 years ago, the job that I'm doing was being done by about 3 inspectors. So we are sort of short on those resources, but we'll be working with our probation and development unit. So we'll be having new probationers working alongside us, our special constables, our tasking teams, just to try and sort of really focus in on the areas of concern. Richmond does remain one of the safest boroughs in the whole of London, but as I say on all of these calls, that doesn't mean that you should expect any less of a service from the Metropolitan Police. And I will always be in those resources meetings, fighting the corner to have those resources in Richmond, as I should be, really, as your borough inspector. I'd just like to really quickly bring in PC Young, if he's able. We were having a few technological difficulties because I know he's in one of the bases. I don't know if he's Grant, are you?
I am, yeah. I'm actually at home at the moment, so it is working.
Oh, in your own time. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's how dedicated I am in my own time. At home, on my day off, look at that. That's what you expect.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm PC Young. Hopefully a lot of you will know me now. I've done 3.5, nearly 4 years, maybe on Hampton North. For the last couple of months, I've been responsible for Hampton itself. So I've moved across now. Yeah, we've done quite a few good things this year, but I don't have a great deal to tell either because the COVID has obviously put a lot of our crime stats down. So I don't have those to hand at all at the moment. I can tell you that it's been quite a good year in terms of results. So we have had a couple of warrants again, which we've done on numerous estates, which I'm sure most of you will probably know what they are. Our main problem is ASB, or antisocial behaviour, which we have had usually around the COVID regulations, parties, things like that, etc. But by and large, from my point of view, it's been quite a good year. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see if most crime has dropped across the board, street crime especially. And in terms of arrest and stop and search, obviously that's continued throughout the year, but with less people on the streets, you will probably see less of those as well. By and large, I think it's been a pretty good year, and it's a good ward to look forward to. And hopefully next time we have another one of these meetings, hopefully face to face, I'll have more info for you. I'll leave it in that, and if you've got any questions, please do direct them to me.
Thanks, Grant.
Inspector Robinson, are we expecting to hear from Merrick at all, or?
He's on the call. He's in the meeting.
Ah, Maz, is yours working?
Sorry, I can unmute him, but I can't find his name. What's his name? What's his name?
PCSO Maz Regan. It's shown as.
Yeah, I've requested the unmute.
I am here.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, no, I just reiterate what Grant said. It's been a good year, really. We've worked very hard, working with a lot of different bodies. We've been doing quite a lot of work with the football club down in Oldfield Road, which I know that Councillor Roberts is aware of, getting the fences mended and working alongside that. ASB has not been too bad for us. We did swoop quite quickly onto the barge moored on Hampton Court Road, and PC Young gave out an antisocial behaviour warning for that. And it's just, yeah, it's been a good year for us. We will continue to work hard.
Thanks, Vaz.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of our representatives from the police. Right, so that's all of our presentations for this evening. And we can now start the community conversation discussion. So who would like to start with a question to the panel? I'm just looking down our chat list. The first one I have here is, I've recently moved to Hampton neighbourhood. How do I volunteer and get involved with community initiatives? Who would like to answer that?
Well, that's a lovely question. I don't have the answer. That's a really nice question.
Well, if I may be greasy to the chair for 1 moment, I could say no better way to get involved is by joining the Hampton Society, which is really at the heart of Hampton community. So I would suggest that would be a great place to start. And of course, there are various organisations and groups, and there are always places that are looking for volunteers when the new normal kicks back in. So I'm sure that Linden Hall would be keen to have people who might be willing to volunteer. The small bookshop by the railway station, they're always looking for people. It's really just a case, if you're keen, there's always politics. I wouldn't recommend it, but there's always that. And so there may be lots of other things. I would just keep an eye out and join in. The Hampton Society is probably your best bet for a starter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gareth. It's certainly not on the payroll. I just have to.
Do I get free membership this year?
Can I come in on that too, Chair?
Yes, by all means, April.
So there's other ways to get involved with community initiatives. There's the Hampton Inspired Hub, which is at the Old Waterboard Club. They've been coming a long way since they opened up. So there's lots of different community events going on there. And of course, Linden Hall. But if you want to get involved with more community stuff relating to crime, then of course, join the Neighbourhood Watch Owl. I'm sure John can tell you more about that. Or drop us an email and I could forward details about how to join as well. And as Carole mentioned, there's the Safer Neighbourhoods Board, and that meets regularly and it's open to everybody. But then other community things would be things like helping out with the food bank. And I'm sure the Trussell Trust would be glad to hear from volunteers or the Vineyard. And that will make sure more food gets collected for those that need it.
Thank you, Councillor Coelho. We're very lucky in this borough to have so many organisations that people can at least get in contact with, if not join. And all details will be available after the event. Now, I have a couple more questions.
I can see the Councillor Samuel is wishing to get in there, Chair.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't. You're going to have to all gesticulate wildly if you want to join in.
I won't gesticulate wildly. I would simply add that one of the best ways to be involved in the community is to follow your own interests. If you're interested in a choir, there are musical activities. If you're interested in art, there are art activities. So in addition to what others have said, I'd say, what are your main interests? And there's something there for you to join to pursue them.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I see that Robert Leadbetter would just like to make a comment on this subject.
Just getting you to unmute, Mr. Leadbetter.
There we are.
There we are. Very good.
I would just like to advise everybody that there is the great and glorious undertaking in Hampton, namely the Hampton and Hampton Waterworks Railway, and that always needs volunteers. We accept volunteers of all trades and of all ages, and we'll teach you whatever skills you want to learn about. But it is the Hampton and Hampton Waterworks Railway, which will start at its station at the end of Oldfield Road in a few years' time. Meanwhile, we're working up at Kempton at the moment, and we do need volunteers, station staff, ticket staff, tea ladies, and engine drivers. You'd be surprised we are short of locomotive drivers. So if anybody wants to drive a steam locomotive, get in touch with the Hampton and Hampton Waterworks Railway and we'll teach you. But you must come down on a Sunday because that's when we operate. And we'll be operating from March next year onwards.
Thank you, Robert. Gosh, who doesn't want to be an engine driver? Right, I have a few more questions, and I just wanted to emphasise that really the subject of tonight's conversation is community safety. So if we could try and keep those questions focused particularly on community safety, that would be good. I have a couple of questions here. Question on drug dealing. So if I could bring in a representative from the police on that, I think would probably be best to be answered. I'm not sure what the question is, but who's asked the question on drug dealing? Karen Moreton, please. Is Karen there?
Yeah, just unmuting. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you.
Hi. Just to pick up on something that we spoke to the police about in the summer. I live up near the Everydays off Priory Road. And we had some involvement with the neighbourhood policing team, including PCSO Maz actually, around some antisocial behaviour and also some hate crime that was going on. It was a bit of a targeted campaign between two households. As a result of our interactions with the neighbourhood policing team, we did mention on several occasions that there seems to be a problem with drug dealing happening. We know who two of the dealers are, and we also know that some of the dealing is going on outside the everyday shop in daylight hours. And one of the other dealers seems to operate more widely and seems to now be masquerading as a delivery person. So I just wanted to say, what can we do to try and get something to happen around this? Because it's something that we've mentioned to the police on several occasions. Myself and several neighbours have also called in with intelligence around people being picked up by cars at certain times. We've provided car registration numbers, etc., etc. But we don't really want this behaviour to keep on carrying on our doorstep.
Would a representative from the police like to join into that?
Yeah, so I can give a bit of an overview. I don't know if either Grant or Maz will be familiar with the particulars, but what I would say is please do sort of continue to report in any activity like this. I realise it might be sort of frustrating if you're reporting it in and don't see anything being done, but that doesn't necessarily mean that things aren't being done. Sometimes we will send, if we get the information like this, we'll send people out in plain clothes, or we'll task other teams to go and patrol in plain vehicles, unmarked vehicles, sorry, to build on that intelligence picture. Or we'll start to put together information. Grant spoke earlier about some of the works on warrants that we've been doing, but obviously to sign off on a warrant, we have to have not just one bit of intelligence, because we have to make sure that it's proportionate. So please do continue to report information in like that. I realise it might be frustrating, but we do, drug dealing is a massive issue for us across Richmond, across the whole of the southwest, and it continues to be one of our main priorities. Grant, I don't know if you've got anything more to add from a local point of view. Oh, we might need unmuting. Can Grant unmute? Oh.
Okay, I think I'm in. I think I'm back. Yeah, it is an issue across the ward, and as the Governor says, as a whole across Richmond. It is across London, as you'd expect. With the everydays in particular, I think I know the people who you're talking about, and we do make efforts to stop them every time we see them. The cars, I can assure you, every time we get a registration plate is put through the P&C, which is our national computer, so we can see who owns it, etc., and work is done around that. However, a lot of the time it will come back to just Joe Bloggs, and there's no information more we can do with that. Unless it flags up as a big time dealer who we know, and obviously we struggle around that, but rest assured we appreciate the information and we do look into it every single time. We have a policing system before it even comes through to us, where the info is often put in ready for us to look at each morning. So we do appreciate it. We say carry on doing it. If we do have an opportunity to do warrants, hopefully you've seen, as I said, we've done 3 this year just on a couple of estates on Hampton North's ground in itself. We're more than happy to do it when we get the information. We just need to build up a bigger picture. However, we are aware of the people. We rely on you to keep putting it in, and we will still stop them every time we see them. And eventually we'll either be able to push it, or we'll be able to actually get some good results and get them arrested, which is obviously what we hope for.
And can I just double check, because I think a lot of us have kind of lost momentum. I mean, we were collecting lots of information over the summer. I think it was a bit more visible over the summer because people were hanging around outside a little bit more. But you know, what's the best information that we can give to you? I mean, should I be logging when every time my neighbour goes out on his little delivery computer? You know, is that useful or not?
Depends if you believe he's drug dealing or not. It's as simple as that, really. If your information's good and you believe it, then yes, report it every time you see him, because it will give us a pattern of when he's going out, where he's going, what he uses to get around on. However, if it's just your neighbour popping down the shops, then absolutely not. No, I don't need to know that. How I know it can be discouraging. However, these things, they often do take time. It doesn't mean they're not being looked at and not being worked on by people. It just means we need a complete picture built up before we can act on it. Putting someone's door in, going through their house, taking away their liberty is obviously quite a big thing. So it does require info, usually from multiple sources. But in the meantime, we will always be happy to get it and gather it and gather it. And when we are allowed to act on it, we will do. There are preventative things we can do. You know, you can tell your friends, getting them to report, etc., etc. If we have it for multiple, as I said, it will certainly help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just jumping in as chair, do we think this is just tackled on a local level, or are you aware of anything feeding this area and feeding sort of small-time drug dealers in this area that's coming from outside of the local area or even the outside of the borough? Is that something that's looked into?
It usually is looked into, yeah. However, I don't think we're particularly unique in that. I don't think we are a target for people to come in and out of. It's not to say that these dealers don't do that, but most of the people who we've been talking about today, or who I believe we've been talking about today, we believe live here, they work here, and they do their dealing here. And they're essentially small-time local dealers, which is why we rely on a local picture for our community to put together for us, so we can do their doors, because we know exactly where they live half of the time. We just need the information. That's all it is.
Thank you, PC Grant Young. The next question I've got is from Derek Sanders. Is that right, Derek Sanders? Would you like to put your question forward? Is Derek there? Yes. Yeah. Hello, Derek.
Hiya. Thanks, William. I'm just aware that I spend quite a bit of time, too much time probably, on Nextdoor. And I see so many people getting really frightened about Nottingham knockers, or the people we know affectionately as Nottingham knockers. I don't know whether you know the phrase. They turn up, there may be 3 or 4 of them. They've come from a certain area. They've got a bag full of goods that they want to sell you, whether you want to buy them or not. And they'll frighten the pants off little old ladies who've been living in peace and quiet for weeks. We get messages that we share about, oh, they're up the road, you know, I'm in Gloucester Road, Hampton. You know, I'll get a message that they're at 18, and so the ladies are told, don't open the doors. Even I have a problem sometimes shunning them without getting them to smash my gate closed. And they are nasty people, most of them. And I don't know, because I don't see any news of, oh yeah, the police have taken action, they've been there and they've given them a warning. I don't know what laws we have to protect ourselves against them. I mean, are there hawkers? Can the police take any action against them?
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yes and no. The council members can probably clarify for me, but I don't believe we actually do give peddlers licenses on this borough. So by knocking door to door and offering goods, I do believe is an offence. However, it's an offence dating back about 150 years, something like that. It's a very, very old law, and it's very rarely acted upon in law. However, it does exist. You can always warn them, tell them to get away, because the police are aware that it is an offence. We don't issue peddlers license, etc., and a lot of them will leave on the threat of that. We do act on it if we get these reports, because usually there's other offences involved. So, as you said, if there's threatening words being said or aggressive behaviour, anything like that, and there are other offences. However, it will often be prioritised, I assume, based on the aggression, based on who it's targeting, etc., etc. So you might not always get a response from the police instant. It will be prioritised. We like to know. Again, giving that information to us, we will input it on a system. We want dates, times it happens, descriptions of the people, etc., etc. And myself and Maz, we're covering the entire area. So if we are out and about, we will try to get down to you. We will always make an effort to come down if it concerns someone particularly. But my advice would be to tell them it's an offence under the Peddlers Act. We don't issue a licence, and if the aggression continues, then depending on the seriousness of the aggression, it's either a 999 call or an email or a Crime Stoppers call, and we can act on it at a later time.
Well, thank you, Grant. Those details will be available after this event, but they are worth keeping at hand because you might think it's too trivial for a 999 call, especially if it's just threatening behaviour, but not necessarily overly threatening. But I have to say that I'm with Derek. Trying to, with the goodness of my heart, listen to these people as they come. I don't think there's anything in it at all. I think it's a fabrication completely, and they are incredibly offensive. It doesn't matter how much time you give them or listen to them, they're not interested. Anyway, I shall put opinion to one side. Would anybody else like to come in on that? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, if I may. One thing which is very useful to do if you get on well with your neighbours is to establish a WhatsApp group. We have one of these in Percy Road where I live, and we're able to let everybody know within seconds that one of these guys is out knocking on doors in the local area, and we can quickly ping all of the local residents, and people know not to answer the door. It's quite right. We don't issue peddlers' licenses in this borough, and nor would we. But it's more about the communication amongst you all. So getting it out on Nextdoor is fine, but it does need people to be there on Nextdoor reading it. Whereas if you can do it straight into people's mobile phones, and this could be for anything. Had a break in last week, heard this, heard that, heard the other. It's part of that community building and information sharing, which is really one of the biggest things that you can do to prevent crime in your local area. I see that Geoffrey's wanted to.
Yes, Geoffrey.
Yes, if I could extend that, and this really is a question for the inspector. Residents report to me, and we have it at home quite frequently, telephone calls, which in their way are quite threatening. They're usually something to do with cutting off your internet and less. But the one last week, which was really frightening, was someone purporting to be from the income tax and threatening criminal prosecution unless you immediately something or the other. Well, the reputation of the police action and fraud telephone lines are so bad, we haven't even bothered to report it. But could I ask the police inspector if she would represent people like my constituents and us with the higher authorities and try and get the police to provide something that deals with what is an enormous amount of fraud on the telephone?
Yeah, so we have actually, and I can definitely get it circulated to you, got some information from our central crime prevention team around phone scams that has been put on. I think it has gone out on Nextdoor and various social media, but I did sort of raise concern last week that it may not be going necessarily by those means to who we need it to go to, in terms of, especially if people don't have internet. So I definitely have that information that I'm more than happy to circulate to this group for you to circulate on, because that is something that's of a big concern for us here in Richmond. So yeah, I'd actually welcome your help on that in circulating that advice out.
Councillor Coelho.
Yes, can I just add to that as well? Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I think just over a year ago at the last police liaison group meeting in the White House, we had a cybercrime talk, and there was a presentation on that, which would be really useful if that was circulated too.
Yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do it on Zoom and MS Teams. It needs to be updated. Sadly, the statistics are a bit out of date because the volume of crime and the amounts have sadly gone up. But yeah, we are working very hard to do that as soon as we can.
Okay, I have another question from Nupur Majunda. Is Nupur, are they available to speak? It's the question is about burglary.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Nupur.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. I live in Rectory Grove, just off Hanworth Road. And within the span of 15 years, I had 2 burglaries in my house. Once my car was stolen, and the second time people just moved in and have taken a lot of stuff. Now, each time we have reported the crime to the police, it seems we are just left with no feedback as to what has happened to the cases. Nobody comes back to us. And we're just left in the might of the insurance companies, really. And over the years, I've also heard many other burglary cases in this ward. And nobody seems to have a closure to any of these cases. also good for the community to know that if you've cracked any of the cases, what those cases have been, how, you know, if anybody has ever been caught, because now everybody almost feels that it's just a matter of for us to deal with the insurance rather than, you know, getting a closure to any of these traumatic incidents. So are we planning anything ahead, because the unemployment is rising? Burglaries, I don't know what the stats says, but it feels like it has risen and it has gone up, and cars have been stolen, silencers, the car silencers are now being stolen, bikes are being stolen. So how are we prepared to face that situation now?
Yeah, it is an issue. It's historically something that always rises over Christmas, but we are aware, especially this year, we did see burglary really sort of dip during lockdown, and that's probably for the obvious reason that people were at home. So obviously with coming out of the second lockdown, and with it generally being a Christmas period anyway, in which we see an increase, we are very much aware of it. I do realise it's probably really frustrating when you're reporting it in and perhaps you're not getting that service from the initial 101 or 999 call, because it's an awful crime and it's really impactful, isn't it, having someone in your home or in your car. Completely get that. So it is definitely something that we need to take very seriously, but please do always again report it in. Because even if sometimes the calls go to our call centre and it does unfortunately get triaged before it even gets to, you know, Grant and Maz out on the streets to deal with, which is a really sort of unfortunate a situation and political one that I won't go into. But, you know, if you report it, it all goes towards our analysis of where the burglary hotspots are. So at least we can get our resources into the right places. You know, I realise that's probably a bit of a frustrating incident when you have already been a victim of a crime, but we do work sort of quite closely with our teams in CID around trying to offer this reassurance piece, and, you know, sort of predictive mapping, we call it, in terms of patrolling the right areas.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Nepal, for the questions. Is that been answered satisfactorily as much as possible?
Yes and no, because it's real actions that we would like to see, because if none of the cases, and also how the police gets in touch with us with positive news. So if there has been a burglary and it has been cracked, and if someone's happy, we also need to know about that, because all we get to hear about is the cry that, you know, the burglary has taken place and something has been stolen, and that's about it. And nobody has ever come back and said, you know what, I've got back my stuff, or, you know, they've tracked the case and we're really happy. So that kind of rises the anxiousness even more. So if there is a way.
And could I ask you, like, what do you think would be the best medium for us? Because we do try and push this out on social media, on like Nextdoor and Twitter, but is there a particular platform or way do you think that we could get this information out if we've got these good news?
I think the best way would be, you know, when we have these community Facebook groups, like say Hampton Facebook group or a Twickenham Facebook group. And if you can report, post anything that's very positive on it. So this crime happened and this is what has been cracked. And then people will get to know automatically, because now as a social media, the tool is quite useful. Or even if you would like to put it on maybe obviously with permission from the council heads and the councillors, you know, maybe some positive news on the council website, because a lot of people do get onto the council website. So positive news is also good for the community, you know.
Yeah,
and
no, brilliant.
We feel reassured that something has been done.
I think that's also something that hopefully John will be able to cover in his own newsletters as well.
Yes, indeed. I was just going to say that. Have you joined the Hampton and Hampton North Neighbourhood Watch newsletter that I produce?
Not yet, John, no. I'll do that.
Contact the police with your name and address and I'll add you, because we include good news stories.
All right. Okay. So is it just a Hampton newsletter? How do I contact?
Hampton North.
Hampton North.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. Just email the police and I'll include you, because it's particularly interesting burglaries. But it's even better when they say, yes, we've caught them.
Yes,
sometimes
exactly.
that's a long process from when the event, before all the evidence is given. So, and until that's happened and they're convicted, you can't put too much in the newsletter. But
okay,
please join and you see what I mean.
Fantastic. So I will also recommend this to all my other neighbors, that they should join in the Hampton North newsletter, because a lot of them probably don't know about it as well.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Right.
Well, John's details will be following after this, but I'd just like to support that by saying, if you've got an interest in something, as I said earlier, we've got lots of groups around Hampton. You should get the details for all of them after this event. I do encourage everybody to join the ones that they have some interest in, because it is going to be the channel of information if you're interested in that particular thing. And it's wonderful having social media. It's wonderful having this level of technological contact, but we can't contact you if we don't know that you want to hear from us.
True.
So,
True.
and I'd just like to finish on that and say that when you're joining groups like this, your data is secure, and that is a big issue, that you don't want to be signing up for things willy-nilly, not knowing where your details are going to. You should be able to trust your local organisations to keep your data secure. As a matter of law, but you know, at least you know, have a face next to the people. Councillor Roberts, you wanted to jump in.
Just yes, if I may. One thing which I did spot on social media earlier this week is that there are quite a lot of bicycles that get recovered by the police. They'll find somebody who goes out nicking a load of bikes, and they've got all of these bikes at the depot, but they don't know who they are, because too few people take the frame number of the bike, so that when they want to try to repatriate the bike to the owner, they can't do it. So what is really, and the police may tell me I'm talking out the back of my head at the moment, but what I'm sure they would find very useful is if you've got things which are valuable, try and get as much detail of them as possible. If you've got jewellery, a bit of a photograph, so that when you report the theft, but hopefully will never happen, if it does get recovered, it makes it far easier for them to return it to its rightful owners. Because at the moment, we report things. I mean, we get people who will stick a £1,000 bike in a shed with a £2.50 padlock on it, and it's so all of those things are really useful things.
That's definitely that's so true, Councillor Roberts. And as well, we do a Met Trace where we mark the bikes with special infrared special water. That hadn't been done a lot over the summer, largely due to COVID restrictions, but we are looking to bring that back, especially on the lead up to Christmas and after Christmas with new bikes people might purchase for Christmas.
If they can find them. I believe that Birdie bikes are sold out all the time because there's been so much interest in bikes.
It's an ill wind, William.
Could I just, apologies for going back on a previous question, but I didn't allow Derek to respond to the answers that he was given about Nottingham Knockers. Derek, could I ask you to unmute and come back to see if you were satisfied with the answers?
Yeah, thanks, William. I just wanted to record the fact that Rebecca, when people call because they've had a crime, because they've been burgled, or because this scrote has been frightening them at their front door, if they get a response from you guys, whether it be 11 o'clock or I'm sorry, we ran out of time, we weren't able to do it. If we knew that the police had actually received news of the crime and got involved, or even got involved enough to realise they missed him, there would be a much more positive attitude on things like Nextdoor or FaceTime, WhatsApp or whatever. But most of the time, you just get the report, oh, I reported to the police, but they've taken no action. They're not interested, And so Nipur, I mean, she probably thought they probably haven't done anything about it. Whereas they possibly did. It's if you haven't responded to a person's pain, they'll think you don't give a monkeys.
Yeah, no, I completely, absolutely understand that. And there is just a bit of a disconnect really between, ourselves as a Southwest unit and those that sit in the 999, the control centre. And certainly if people do have those concerns, I think Ellie will circulate the ward mailbox, the details, if you don't already have it, for the Hampton Safer Neighbourhood teams. By all means, do just send a quick email into that inbox, because it's quite a quick job, especially if you've got a CAD. Whenever you make a call, they should give you a CAD reference number, especially when you get that reference number. If you can quote that to, in an email to the Safer Neighbourhood teams, they'll very quickly be able to tell you what it was that happened. And
when we get this sort of feedback, like Grant was saying, where you need 2 reports about something about something to do with drug dealing. I don't understand why you need 2 for a policeman to turn up and get involved and sort of warn him off or something. Maybe you don't want to do that. But what do you mean? Sorry, we're talking about the drug dealers around the supermarket. Yeah.
Derek.
You mean different?
Hey. Hello.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just.
Derek, that's not what Grant's referring to. What Grant's referring to is 2 bits of information to obtain warrants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why you need a warrant.
You can't just obtain a warrant on 1 piece of information. It has to be multiple pieces. That's what Grant's referring to.
Yeah. So we could, for example, if someone called in saying there's drug dealing, you know, we might on that occasion send a unit round. Yes. But if it's something that we're aware of that is a problem, we may sort of add it to our intel, because getting a warrant can be a lot more effective in terms of getting to the source of it, or taking out a load more drugs than just what is on the street.
Rebecca, can I just ask you to just explain what a warrant is?
Sorry, so a warrant is basically the power authorised by the court. So it'll go through myself. So Maz or Grant or one of the teams will collect a load of information, bring it to me, I'll sign it off, and they'll apply to the court for a warrant, which is basically the power to go into someone's address.
So these guys last year that were doing drugs in the toilets in Carlisle Park, where one had a gun and the other one had the drugs, you had to get a warrant before you got involved?
I only took over in February, so I can't. I'd have to go back and look at if we're talking about a specific case. I'd have to go and have a look at what happened.
If you rely on getting a magistrate or someone to sign off,
I can answer that.
Okay, Derek, could I just ask you to let Maz answer that, because I think he was around at the time.
Yeah, Maz. Maz is gone.
I was involved in the whole process. At that particular incident, the boys were arrested, and after that, when they were taken to custody, their houses were, the custody sergeant granted the officers to go and do searches of their properties because they were in custody with the drugs. So that was allowed. But that case went to court. He pleaded guilty at court, and he got youth referral.
Yeah, Maz, you're confirming
that's all we could do with that. We put him in front. We did our part of the.
We're losing him, Maz.
Oh, Maz, that connection's bad.
I put him in front of the court, and then it goes from there.
Maz, thanks for that. My point is that you actually got involved and you didn't arrest. You apprehended the people before you saw that you would need an arrest warrant. And that's why I can't understand Grant saying, when there were 2 people trading drugs outside a supermarket, why you need an arrest warrant before you even get involved.
Because it just all very much depends on. Sorry, Maz.
Let me just jump in quickly, because it's just a quick one-off thing that's clearly been misconstrued. No one's talking about arrest warrants here. That's not the point. If we get a report come out tomorrow to say so-and-so's drug dealing outside of a shop,
I'm listening.
I will turn up at that shop. I will speak to the person involved, and we can take it from there. If we see him later out and about, he will be stopped, he will be searched, etc., etc. But warrants come into it, and the 2 pieces of information come into it when we want to prove it right there and then. So we take it to a court and we get access to an address. If I see the person out and about, I don't need 2 bits of information. I will make the inquiries regardless. So that's where the confusion is coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
You report it tomorrow, it will be sorted. But to do a warrant, you will need 2 separate pieces of information to please the courts. That's essentially what we're saying there.
Otherwise, it's one person's word against another, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's essentially it.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the breakdown there, Maz. You might want to turn your visuals off, because then your sound will be a bit clearer, because you've got a very limited broadband. I have the same problem with my father, so it's not unique.
You're very fast with your father.
That's the Met Wi-Fi for you.
Right. I don't have any more questions. If you do have an issue that you'd like to find a resolution for, or at least have some feedback on, please write that in the chat line. But while we're waiting for another question, could I just ask John Murray from the Police Liaison Group to just explain what he has as far as his book of little book of scams, which some of you might find extremely useful.
Right. I have to say, I read all the comments in next door, and I see, oh, there's a scam about HNS at RC, about this and that. If you had the little book of scams, you wouldn't need to post it on next door, and you would know immediately it's a scam, because most of them are. So it's a book. It's produced by the police in conjunction with the banks. They're free. I can get thousands of them. If you email the police, I'll liaise with Grant and Maz, and I'll deliver one to your address. There's so much information there. There's also one about telephone scams, which sadly are rife, because a lot of the people who don't use the internet get it on the phone or on the door. So very good booklet on that. If people read that, they would know a hell of a lot more, because there's so much information there. So please do that. Does that answer?
How can people get hold of a copy of that, John?
Email me at the police mailbox. Grant and Maz will pass it on to me, and I will deliver it. So we need your address, that's all.
Thank you, John. I have a couple more questions, but Avril, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a general consensus from the audience here about the regular theft of spirits from the local Sainsbury's, and would they support Sergeant McCandless if he was to oppose sales of spirits going forward, unless the Sainsbury's store were to take special measures into keeping them more secure?
No pun intended.
No, I was wondering if people wanted to show their hands if they'd be in support of that. So.
Who would like to come in on that? Because I have no knowledge of this at all.
There was an assault there. So one of the duty managers, Michael, was thrown through the glass window seriously by a shoplifter and seriously injured. And following that, him and the store manager, well, the store manager's just changed, but the previous store manager were looking on relocating the alcohol. But I've heard that Sergeant McCandless is minded to take some other action if the company at higher levels don't relocate where their alcohol is. Someone said which Sainsbury's, it's a Tangley Park one. It's hidden around the corner and the cameras don't work. So.
Oh dear. Does anybody want to come back on that at all? No, right. Okay, so that's shocking. But moving on, we've got a couple of questions. Could I ask MJ to put their question forward? What's your name? M?
It's Michael. Sorry, it's Michael J. I'm in Hampton.
Thank you, Michael.
Good evening. I'm one of the local neighbourhood watch coordinators here, and I have great sympathy for the police, and I always support them. I was a special constable for 17 years, but I know a lot of neighbours and friends who are losing confidence in the police because of lack of action by the police.
In anything in particular that you can actually give the police something to answer to?
Well, I can, yes. Last year I was told by one of the local police team, who were very good. I have great respect for the officers on the street, because I know how difficult it is. I was actually told last year that there are certain portions of the law that not that they can't enforce them, but they will not enforce them. And with respect to the question earlier about not getting any apparent response from the police, I was threatened with violence earlier this year, and I dialed 999. That was in the street just outside my house. And it doesn't worry me because I know how to deal with it, but it's not very nice. I went round to the local police officer and the police officer made a report after calling 999, and that was all I heard of it. I then got a visit 10 months later from a local police officer purely because I put it on the Met Police website. They were asking for incidents, information on incidents. I was then invited to possibly help with the Speed Watch campaign. So I emailed the local police, and that was weeks ago. I've heard nothing. There is very poor communication. Now, we know that a lot of police work is done quietly and we don't all hear about it. That goes without saying, but there is extremely poor communication, and that worries me that the public are losing confidence in the police because, as we heard earlier, sometimes you never get any information back. We know they're all busy and understaffed, but there is plenty of time to put out statistics. I went to a huge police public meeting last year in Richmond, where a senior police officer was only interested in putting out statistics. What the public want to see is police officers visibly on the street. That is the backbone of policing around the world. So,
thank you, Michael.
What are you going to do?
We are running out of time, so just, if you don't mind, you've unpacked quite a lot of things there. Can you give us an answer in as briefly as, well, as valuably as possible, in as brief amount of time as possible, please, Rebecca?
Yeah, of course. So I guess
where is the communication dropping down? Is it down to manpower, or is it is there some sort of break in the system?
Manpower, absolutely. You know, as I said earlier, you know, before we used to have a hell of a lot more, excuse my language, PCs and PCSOs on the borough. One sergeant now, Gavin McCandless, will cover 5 wards, myself covering 18. We've been so streamlined down, unfortunately, that it literally comes down to risk and priority, unfortunately. It's literally a question of manpower.
But that sounded like quite a risky thing, because Michael said he was threatened.
Yeah, and so again, without knowing the specifics, and I'd be happy to sort of take that away if you wanted to email me so I can look into the specific crime that is referenced without looking at sort of the specifics of what happened. I couldn't really answer for it, but I'm happy to take that away if Mr. J has got reference numbers or would like to contact me afterwards.
Well, can I just ask, what would be the regular channels of communication to victims of crime, or victims of reported crime anyway? What should we expect?
Yeah, so absolutely. So when a crime is reported, it's put on the system. Sometimes it will be what we call triaged and closed automatically, and that may be if there's no witnesses, no CCTV, no further lines of inquiries that the telephone reporting team see. They may close it automatically. And again, that's because we've got limited resources in terms of what we deal with. If there is further lines of inquiries, that will be allocated to an investigating officer on borough, and it will depend on the nature of it as to where it goes. It could sit with us, the response team, CID. And then absolutely, victims of crime should be contacted. Within every 28 days, they should be contacted. When it's assigned an officer, and when it's closed, they should have been contacted. So yeah, there's no real reason that I can give for that without looking at the specifics of what happened.
Okay, I appreciate your response, but it didn't sound. I do keep hearing that resources are always the issue. Now,
yeah, I have to be.
It would seem that a solution to that would be secondary resources that can follow up on these sort of things, which are, but hey, I don't make the rules, but I've heard that response for many, many years.
Yeah, I know, and it is as frustrating. I feel your frustration, because it's frustrating for me as well, honestly. It really is. I'd love to have sort of the old blueprints and the neighbourhood teams that we had previously, because I completely agree with Mr. J. Like, yeah, officers on the street is what the public want to see, and it's what I want to give you. I completely agree with you. But yeah, unfortunately, it is.
So is this a national issue that needs to be dealt with centrally at governmental level, or is it a local level? Both.
Well, I mean, locally, the strength for neighbourhood policing is 2 PCs and 1 PCSO, because we are now sort of seeing the knock-on effects of the big recruitment campaign that the Met has done. So from January, we will be assigned some new probationary officers on rolling attachments. So we will see sort of a new 2 or 3 officers joining the teams. So we can sort of hopefully start to build numbers in that way. And again, I think, you know, the answer for us is working closely with our partners. Like this summer, you know, we saw a lot of work with the COVID marshals that are funded by the council, and the joint work with them is absolutely great. And I think that's the way, you know, I'm never going to be able to get more numbers for neighbourhoods. That's way sort of beyond my control. But what I can do is work better with partners and use what we've got to the best of our ability.
I suppose my question really was that you're in the only position to be able to do that. We can demand as voters and ratepayers, but
yeah, you've
got the chain of command to report up to, not us.
Yes, and I do. Believe me, I do. I go into those resourcing meetings very passionately to support Richmond, but you know, unfortunately for us, the fact is, if there is a riot over in Lambeth, that I do. My resources will be taken away, as much as I will always fight, because I think that's my job as the Richmond inspector. But ultimately, you know, if the need is greater, even in, you know, within our Southwest policing unit, even if the demand is greater in Wandsworth, then those resources, in terms of what is tasked, will be tasked over to where the shootings and the stabbings are.
Oh dear. Thank you. Right, we really are rapidly running out of time. I have one final question from Councillor Nicholson. Would you like to see if we can sort of get it done in 3 minutes?
Okay, my concern is speeding in Oldfield Road. Will there be any resources locally to actually catch people speeding, particularly at St Mary's School, arrival and departure times?
Is this, when you say action, what do you mean? Speed?
Actually, they're police.
Radar zones or people on the street with radar guns?
Well, it could be that, but also I'd like to see if the local police could actually be there and find people.
Sorry, Rebecca, back to you again, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's one more sort of for our safer transport colleagues. So I could certainly take that away and get, unless Grant, you happen to know the sort of specifics of the area. But if not, I can take that away for the safer transport colleagues who deal with the speeding and the community speed watch. That's not necessarily something for the local neighbourhood teams, but I could get the answer.
So is that currently?
Did you say St Mary's? Where did you say? Sorry, St Mary's School.
Yes, Oldfield Road.
Oldfield Road, and right round the back where the businesses are as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we can suggest we can put a email across to a team. We did have a similar issue, I believe it was Hanworth Road, and the PTSO for Hampton North did manage to get a safer transport team to have a look at it. However, like everything else, I can't make promises. I can just say we can put the email across to them, and if they have the resources and the availability, then it is something that they do. And I'm sure they will be happy to do if possible.
Is this something that gets scheduled in for areas around the borough? I mean, perhaps this is something, I don't know whether it's something that the council should be answering at all, seeing as it's the councillor who asked the question, but do we, I haven't seen any sort of particular speed zone presence at all, certainly since the lower speed limits were introduced last year.
I've asked for the speeds to be monitored down there. I've asked the council officers to do that. but it would be good if some fines could be issued to actually put people off.
I think the worry is that it's not a real speed limit because they don't see any actions being taken.
I think I've got an answer to that. When I did the community road watch on Oak Avenue about a year or so ago, the PCSOs I was with said to me, if they offend 3 times that particular registration, then they will get a fine. But initially, it's the first and second times, it's just warnings.
Well, even that would be something, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Right. As we don't have any new questions, different questions that have come up, and it is now 8 o'clock, I'd like to draw tonight's meeting to a close. I'd like to thank all of our panel for their contributions. And I'd also like to thank, most of all, you all for registering to join this conversation. And I even if some of your comments haven't been answered in person, it's very good to see all of the comments that have been coming through on the chat line, and they will be made public afterwards as well. So you should see, if you've not already seen, the sort of level of conversation that's come backwards and forwards throughout the evening. So
before you go, thank you very much. I would be remiss if we let you go without thanking you for your excellent chairing this evening, which has been absolutely top-notch.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and it's really good to see all of those faces as well.
Absolutely,
especially at this time. So have a good evening, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all. And don't forget to have a look at the hamptonsociety.org.uk if you would be interested in joining the Hampton Society and taking part or coming to enjoy one of our many talks and events. Thank you very much and good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, William.